With the release of 2.4, we now have an alternate form for each of the 3 starting characters, and with each of them overshadowing their respective counterparts, you pretty much won't ever see any of them used in the late game. Physical Trailblazer wasn't by any means a good character, but was serviceable for the early game, similar to a Nemo Traveler from Genshin. But we were able to quickly get access to Fire Trailblazer, which like March, both provided utility to warrant some use. Dan Heng, however, is the one that I felt people just completely overlooked. The most obvious reason is the existence of Inhibitor Lunae. I mean, why use a 4-star version of a character when a shiny and exclusive 5-star version of the same character exists, especially since they both fill similar roles as a primary damage dealer. In other gacha games that feature alternate forms of characters, they usually drastically change the playstyle of that character. Let's take a look at Arknights as an example. This is Scotty, a tanky bruiser, and here's her alternate form, a support with an AoE buff. But Dan Heng is a DPS character that changes into another DPS character, which is fine, and I don't have any problems with that, right? We can look at Fate for an example. There are multiple versions of King Arthur who each can be used to clear certain content but won't necessarily replace one another, which the same can be said for Dan Heng, as he was designed to be weaker than Inhibitor Lunae because of how he fits into the HSR lore. However, this probably isn't even the main reason why he isn't used that much, and for that we need to look back in time to April 26, 2023, the release date of Honkai Star Rail. Looking back, it's probably safe to say that many of us who initially played the game, myself included, also played Genshin. And we took concepts from Genshin and applied it into Star Rail, such as team composition or effective artifact farming, as many aspects of Honkai Star Rail did mirror Genshin. And like Genshin, Star Rail gives us a couple of free characters to use. And if you came from Genshin, you should know that the free characters given to us at the beginning of the game were some of the worst characters in the entire roster. This idea of weak early game units likely transferred over to Star Rail, leading many of us to replace the initial cast as soon as we could. But it also didn't help that the 5-star character banner that released with the game was Scylla, a character that shared the same role as Dan Heng. Going back to the Genshin comparison, is like using Sucrose or Nemo Traveler over Venti in version 1.0. And yes, I know that Sucrose is actually a decent unit on her own, but at the time, she was pretty much always compared to Venti. But the same couldn't be said for Dan Heng, and I wouldn't just chalk it up to the rarity of the character either, as Star Rail has its fair share of very usable 4-star characters. And I'm not just talking about the supports. Chinchue can do ridiculous amounts of damage with the right setup, Herta has her uses in Pure Fiction, Xueyi has a unique kit that works against quantum weak enemies, and Sushang is a single target damage dealer with break synergy. Taking an initial glance at Dan Heng's kit, it doesn't look that bad actually. His skill and ultimate damage multipliers are both extremely high, and he is also at the moment one of only 2 win DPS characters, with the other being his BFF Blade. Dan Heng's ultimate does 400% damage scaling off his attack, with an additional 120% under the right conditions. And with it only costing 100 energy, you're gonna have this up pretty consistently. But here is where the issues start. To get the 120 bonus, the target must be slowed, which can be applied by his skill, which does 4 hits, and applies a slow if Dan Heng crits. So assuming you have about 60% crit rate, the chances of you not hitting a crit in 4 hits is 2.5%. And in a gacha game, for me, if it's not 100%, it might as well just be a 50-50. But anyways, what I'm trying to say here is that there is a non-0% chance that you can just miss all your crits. The only other reliable sources of slows are imaginary breaks, which I don't know how much you're going to be doing with Win Dan Heng, and the only other sources being Welt's kit and Dr. Ratio's technique. A harmony support or a debuffer will be a lot more useful for Dan Heng, as we'll get into later. Now, there might also be scenarios where you're going to need to ult outside of your own turn, but the slow from the skill has ran out, leading you to potentially lose the 120% multiplier. Dan Heng's talent gives him an insane amount of resistance penetration, 36% at level 10 for his next attack. With a cooldown of 2 turns, this is actually one of the strongest res pen buffs in the entire game. To get this buff, Dan Heng needs to be targeted by an ally's ability, so he works extremely well with Sparkle, Tingyun, Bronya, and Hoho. Now, a 520% multiplier ult with a 36% wind penetration and the additional buff you use to trigger the talent should generate some pretty massive numbers, right? And yeah, you would be correct. The damage will be pretty decent. The problem is actually getting there. Alright, let's just think about it. What if your ult is up, but the enemy isn't slowed, making you wait a turn to get the maximum amount of damage from your ult? What if your ult is up and the enemy is slowed, but your talent isn't? So now you're also going to have to wait another turn. Dan Heng needs to jump through all of these hoops and hurdles, now play his own little mini game to do any meaningful damage, and if you screw up any of these, you're cooked. Now for most characters, traces are meant to help alleviate any issues they might have in their main kit, or just provide some nice quality of life buffs, like Clara, whose traces help against debuffs and crowd control, which is very crucial for her kit as her playstyle involves getting hit and launching a follow-up attack. Or on the more extreme spectrum, there's Firefly, giving weakness in placement, additional break effect, and bonus damage based on break effect. Obviously not every character needs to have traces this broken, but should at least have one or two that works for their playstyle. Dan Heng's A2 increases his chances of getting hit if under 50% HP, which, let's be honest, you probably won't ever be under 50% HP in most of your fights. I mean, this one is just pretty irrelevant. A4 gives him a 50% chance to increase his speed by 20% after hitting an enemy. Your base speed is around 110, so you're getting about 22% more speed. While the additional speed can be nice, it still doesn't help fix any of the issues to his kit. A6 buffs Dan Heng's basic attacks by 40% when hitting a slowed enemy. I mean, if you're using basic attacks in the first place, I think there's something seriously wrong. You pretty much want to be spamming your skill as much as possible. His eidolons are also pretty underwhelming. E1 gives a 12% crit buff if the target is above 50% HP. While crit buffs are always welcome, this one is conditional and only applies in the early stages of a fight when the enemy still has a lot of health. It's useful, but not game changing. E2 reduces the cooldown of his talent by 1 turn, making it easier to manage his wind resist pen. This is a nice quality of life improvement, allowing you to more effectively use his talent outside of his ultimate, without worrying that it won't be available when you really need it. E4 and E6 exist. Now here are where things really start to feel lackluster. E6 requires Dan Heng to defeat an enemy with his ultimate to get an action forward. This is essentially just a worse version of Sealess talent, and is almost unusable against bosses. I mean, are you really gonna waste an ultimate on a random mob just to get the action forward? E6 increases the slow effect of his skill by 8%. This is such a minor improvement that is hard to get excited about. Come on, an 8% increase isn't going to make a noticeable difference in most situations. While the individual kit of a character is undoubtedly important, it's only a fraction of what's really needed to clear stages. Pairing that character with the right supports, light cones, and relics can make a world of difference in their performance. As I've said before, the best types of supports to run with Dan Heng are ones who can target him, along with the standard hypercarry supports like Rame, Robin, and Pela. The problem I have with building him is actually his relics. Currently, the best in slot for Dan Heng is the Pioneer set, which gives a damage bonus based on the amount of debuffs a target has. Fulfilling the requirements for the 2-piece is easy enough with Dan Heng's skill, but getting the 4-piece bonus is impossible to do on its own, forcing you to run a debuffer on your team. Your second best option is the Quantum set, giving 10% defense ignore with an additional 10% if the target has a quantum weakness. This lets you have a little bit more flexibility when it comes to team building. I honestly don't like using either of these sets, as Dan Heng won't be able to get the most use out of them. Hopefully in the future we get a relic set that's a little bit more tailored towards him. You know what could have been cool? If Hoyo made Dan Heng centered around slows and speed buffs. His kit already has multiple sources to increase his own speed as well as slowing his enemies. If they took his A2 and changed it to buff his damage based on the difference in speed between himself and the enemy, that could have resulted in such a more interesting playstyle. And honestly, I can see this happening in the kit of a future character. It would have also been nice if his A6 could apply to his skill as well, letting you get more usage out of it while making the slow on his skill a little bit more impactful. Another easy change that can help prevent missing out on potential damage is just to give his ult charges. The cost and damage will probably need to be adjusted, but by having 2 charges on his ultimate, you won't have to worry about holding ult when enemies aren't slowed or when talent isn't up. Now, after building him and using him for a while, I do want to say that as a damage dealer, he is fine, right? Obviously, he struggles with AoE content, but to be fair, most Hun characters do. His damage isn't that bad, but it's just getting there is hard. You have to be very careful when you're playing him, as he's not very forgiving if you mess up with him. In the end, he is a decent character, very mediocre, gets outclassed by a lot of other units, but he is one of the coolest in my opinion. Like, come on, this guy had one of the best character introductions in any game I've played. I don't care what anyone says. That CPR scene was stolen from us. If Genshin has taught me anything, is that characters usually don't get direct buffs, but I'm on that copium. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, consider subscribing, and comment what you think about these type of character analysis videos. Thanks for watching.